Picture a pharmacy aisle, floor-to-ceiling shelves, painkillers, antiseptics, cold medicine, bandage, sprays, creams. Thousands of tiny boxes, and every one of them exists because there's something in the world capable of making your body hurt. Now delete the whole thing. Every box, every shelf, the building itself. Gone. That's the world your ancestors lived in for most of human history. No pharmacy around the corner, no doctor 3 miles down the road, no hospital, no phone in your pocket telling you that your headache is probably dehydration or apparently a brain parasite. And somehow, some of them survived. Not all of them, but enough of them for long enough that eventually one of their descendants was you. And here's where almost everyone gets this question wrong. We imagine an ancient human getting the same illnesses we get today, except they have absolutely nothing to treat them with. Some poor guy sitting in a cave, burning up with a fever, chewing on a stick because that's all he's got. But that's not really how it worked, because a surprising number of the diseases and medical problems on those pharmacy shelves depend on conditions that simply didn't exist yet. Take measles. Measles is extraordinarily contagious. A person can spread it from 4 days before the rash appears to 4 days afterward. An infection usually produces long-lasting immunity. That means the virus needs a steady supply of people who haven't encountered it before. In a small, isolated population, an outbreak can burn through the susceptible people and then disappear instead of circulating indefinitely. Researchers call this a critical community size problem. Measles needs a sufficiently large and connected population to keep finding new susceptible people. The exact threshold depends on how the population mixes and other factors, so it's better not to think of one magic number. Imagine dropping measles into a band of 30 or 50 people. It could still cause serious illness. It could still kill people. But once the susceptible people were infected, there wouldn't be an endless supply of new hosts waiting behind them. The outbreak could simply run out of people. And that's the important part. Measles is one example of a broader class of diseases whose long-term persistence became much easier once humans started living in larger, denser communities. Agriculture and animal domestication helped create those conditions by increasing population density and putting humans into much closer contact with domesticated animals. Researchers think several major human diseases, including measles, mumps, pertussis, influenza A, smallpox, and tuberculosis, probably or possibly have animal origins or were shaped by those new conditions. So the pharmacy isn't just empty. The list of problems is shorter too, and that's the part nobody really tells you. It's not that ancient humans were somehow tougher than us. They were living before we'd created some of the conditions that made certain diseases so good at spreading, but obviously plenty of things could still kill you, and most of them weren't exotic. They were boring: a cut that gets infected, a tooth that goes bad, a difficult birth, a broken leg, parasites, contaminated water, a fall, a hunting accident, just the ordinary ways a human body can fail when nobody has a modern hospital standing by. So what did they have? The first thing they had was already installed: their own body. Something gets inside you, and before long, you're burning up. That fever isn't simply the infection hurting you. It's part of the body's response to infection. The brain raises the body's temperature set point, and higher temperatures can make conditions less favorable for some pathogens while altering and supporting parts of the immune response. The thing that feels like you're losing can actually be part of the fight. And it's like that all over the body. A cut becomes red, hot, and swollen. That's inflammation. Your immune system is responding to the damage and bringing cells and chemical signals into the area. You throw up, you get diarrhea. Absolutely miserable. But those responses can help remove harmful material or pathogens from your body. You twist an ankle, and suddenly putting your weight on it feels like a terrible idea. That's your nervous system sending a very clear message. Stop using that thing. And then there's one of the strangest parts. When you're properly sick, you don't just feel pain. You change. You get tired. You lose your appetite. You don't feel like talking. You want to lie down somewhere quiet and do absolutely nothing. Researchers call this sickness behavior. It's a coordinated response to infection that can promote rest and reduce normal activity while the immune system is dealing with the illness. Some components may also reduce social contact, potentially limiting transmission, but it's too simplistic to say the body consciously forces isolation because you're contagious. None of your ancestors needed to understand any of that. They didn't know what an immune cell was. They didn't know what inflammation was. They certainly didn't know what a virus looked like. It didn't matter. The machinery was already there, hundreds of thousands of years of biology running quietly in the background with nobody at the controls. Then there's the second system, and this one goes back even further. Wild chimpanzees have been observed swallowing rough, bristly leaves whole rather than chewing them. Research suggests the rough leaves can mechanically help expel intestinal parasites. Chimpanzees also chew the bitter pith of certain plants, and that behavior has been associated with reductions in particular parasite infections. Nobody taught those chimpanzees pharmacology. So the basic idea of using something in the environment to deal with a health problem probably isn't uniquely human, and humans came with the same basic equipment. Your tongue is essentially a chemical detector. Bitterness often signals compounds that can be biologically active or potentially toxic. But here's the interesting part. A substance that affects a parasite can sometimes affect you too. The difference between medicine and poison can be the dose. And knowing that difference is where generations of accumulated knowledge become incredibly valuable. That's where Otzi gets interesting. 5,000 years ago, a man died high in the Alps and was naturally preserved in ice. When researchers examined him, they found that he had intestinal whipworm infection. He was also carrying birch polypore fungus. Some researchers have suggested the fungus may have had medicinal value and could have been carried intentionally because of its properties, but we can't prove that's why Otzi had it. It might have been medicine, it might have had another purpose. The evidence is suggestive, not conclusive. But just imagine the knowledge required to even make that possibility work. Knowing a plant, knowing where it grows, knowing when to collect it, knowing which part to use, knowing how much, and knowing when not to use it. That's a medical system. It just isn't written down. And then there's the third system, the one that may have mattered more than any plant, the rules. Nobody needed to know what bacteria were to understand that some places made people sick. Don't drink from that water. Don't eat that meat. Don't touch that carcass. Don't leave waste right beside where you're sleeping. Move camp when the place becomes filthy. These rules don't require microscopes. They require memory. And being mobile could sometimes help. A small group that moved regularly wasn't creating the same enormous permanent concentration of human waste that later appeared in dense settlements. But let's not turn that into a magical sanitation system. Hunter-gatherers still got parasites. They still encountered contaminated water. They still got infections. They still lived around their own waste. Moving didn't make disease disappear. It simply changed the environment in which diseases spread. And all of that knowledge had to live somewhere. We shouldn't imagine that every group had one elderly person who literally knew the entire medical library. But older adults could preserve and transmit valuable ecological, dietary, and practical knowledge, and researchers have proposed that human longevity itself may have helped populations accumulate and pass information across generations. The specific grandmother as medical encyclopedia idea is a hypothesis, not an established fact. Still, think about what happens when knowledge isn't written down. Someone discovers that a particular plant helps with a particular problem. They remember. They tell someone else, that person remembers, and eventually the information becomes a rule. That's how a society can build a medical tradition without ever having a single medical textbook. Now for the honest part. Because otherwise this starts sounding like some romantic story about how perfectly ancient humans understood nature. They didn't. It failed. Constantly. Childhood mortality was extremely high in many past populations, and infectious disease, injury, childbirth complications, and malnutrition all posed serious risks. At the same time, saying ancient humans only lived to 30 is misleading. Life expectancy at birth was heavily pulled downward by deaths in infancy and childhood, while people who survived those dangerous early years could live well into later adulthood. Hunter-gatherer populations also show substantial survival beyond menopause. So yes, some people made it into their 60s, but plenty never made it to 6. A tooth infection could become fatal. Childbirth could become catastrophic. A broken bone could permanently change your life or end it. An infected cut could be the thing that finally got you. So no, It wasn't better. It was just a different world, with a different set of threats. And then something enormous happened. We stopped moving so much. We started farming. We built permanent settlements. We domesticated animals. We started living in larger populations. And all of those things were enormously successful. They gave us more food, more children, more people, more permanent homes, more civilization. But they also created new health problems. The transition to agriculture is associated in many archaeological populations with increased dental disease and signs of nutritional or physiological stress. And some early farming populations were shorter than contemporary hunter-gatherers. But these patterns weren't universal, and the effects varied considerably by region, diet, and population. So we didn't simply go from healthy hunter-gatherer to sick farmer. It was much messier than that. We traded some problems for others, and eventually those new ways of living created the conditions in which some of the great epidemic diseases could thrive. Agriculture also brought humans into much closer and more sustained contact with domesticated animals and created larger, denser human populations. Two changes that helped some animal pathogens cross into humans and allowed certain crowd diseases to persist. And suddenly the pharmacy aisle starts making a lot more sense. Because we don't just invent medicines, we also create new problems for medicine to solve. We settle down, we build cities, we pack thousands, then millions of people together. We live alongside animals. We change what we eat. We change how we move. And then we discover that the human body wasn't necessarily designed for every environment we can build. So those shelves aren't just a list of things the world does to us. A surprising number of them are answers to problems created by the way we chose to live. Your ancestors didn't survive without modern medicine because they were tougher than you. They survived because they lived in a world with different threats, smaller populations, different diets, different lifestyles, and because their bodies came with an astonishing amount of built-in biological machinery. Then we changed the world. And some of that machinery stopped being enough. So we built something new. We studied the plants, we studied the diseases, we learned what was killing us, we learned how infections spread, we learned how to stop bleeding, we learned how to repair broken bodies. And eventually, we built the aisle. The pharmacy wasn't the opposite of ancient medicine. It's what happened when thousands of generations of human observation finally met chemistry, biology, experimentation, and science. We didn't leave the old world behind completely. We took pieces of it, figured out why they worked, made them safer, made them consistent, and put them in little boxes. Your ancestors had the forest. We have the pharmacy. But underneath both is the same thing: humans getting hurt and refusing to simply accept it.